Climate change is often framed as a scientific and environmental crisis. We see images of melting ice caps, raging wildfires and rising sea levels, but there's another story unfolding, one that is just as crucial. Climate change is also reshaping human cultures around the world. From centuries-old traditions to modern lifestyles, no community is immune to its impacts. Today we'll explore how climate change is not only altering our environment, but also reshaping the ways people live, work, celebrate, and preserve their cultural identities. To understand how climate change impacts culture, we first need to understand the deep relationship between the two. For centuries, human cultures have been shaped by the environments in which they live. From the types of food we eat, the clothes we wear, the festivals we celebrate, and the way we build our homes. Much of our way of life is influenced by the climate and landscape around us. Indigenous cultures are among the first to feel the impacts of climate change. These communities, who have lived in harmony with their environment for generations, are now facing unprecedented challenges. In the Arctic, the Inuit people are witnessing dramatic changes to their way of life. For generations, they have relied on sea ice for hunting and transportation. But as the ice melts at an alarming rate, traditional hunting practices are becoming impossible, threatening food security and cultural traditions. In the Amazon, indigenous tribes are facing both the direct effects of climate change, like forest fires and changing rainfall patterns, as well as deforestation. These environmental changes are not only threatening their homes, but also their deep spiritual connection to the land. In other parts of the world, such as sub-Saharan Africa, indigenous pastoralist communities are struggling with water scarcity. As rivers dry up and droughts become more frequent, traditional ways of life, such as nomadic herding, are becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. Beyond indigenous cultures, climate change is impacting cultural practices around the globe, threatening the very fabric of communities. Take Venice, for example. Known for its historic canals and stunning architecture, the city is facing rising sea levels that threaten its existence. The flooding is becoming more frequent, endangering not only Venice's cultural heritage, but also its thriving tourism industry. Across the Pacific, island nations like Tuvalu and Kiribati are grappling with rising sea levels that could one day submerge entire islands. For many of these cultures, the ocean is not just a physical home, but a spiritual and cultural anchor. Traditional navigation methods and sea-related customs are at risk of being lost forever. In the Himalayan region, the melting glaciers are disrupting water sources for millions of people. Communities that have lived in harmony with the mountains for centuries are now facing an uncertain future, with unpredictable water supplies affecting agriculture and local economies. Climate change is also having a profound impact on food cultures around the world, as changing temperatures and weather patterns disrupt traditional farming and fishing practices. In Europe, wine production is being affected by shifting weather patterns. In places like France and Italy, which are world-renowned for their wines, vineyards are experiencing earlier harvests and reduced yields due to rising temperatures. Meanwhile, in Southeast Asia, fishermen are noticing the effects of warming oceans and coral bleaching. Fish populations are declining, making it harder for coastal communities to sustain themselves. Coffee, a staple in Latin American cultures, is also under threat. In countries like Colombia and Brazil, rising temperatures are making it harder to grow coffee at traditional altitudes, and farmers are battling new pests that thrive in warmer conditions. As food production becomes more unpredictable, global food security is at risk, which could lead to conflicts over resources and the loss of cultural identities tied to traditional food practices. One of the most significant ways climate change is impacting global cultures is through climate migration. As certain regions become uninhabitable due to rising sea levels, extreme heat, or drought, millions of people are being forced to leave their homes. In Bangladesh, one of the countries most vulnerable to rising sea levels, entire communities are being displaced by flooding. This is leading to the loss of homes, livelihoods, and cultural traditions that have been passed down for generations. In sub-Saharan Africa, worsening droughts and desertification are forcing nomadic and farming communities to migrate in search of water and arable land. These displacements are disrupting traditional social structures and ways of life. For Pacific Islanders, the threat of rising sea levels is particularly dire. Some communities are already making plans to relocate to other countries. This raises questions about what happens to cultural identity when people are forced to leave the lands they've called home for centuries. As climate-induced migration increases, we are witnessing not only the displacement of people, but also the transformation of cultural landscapes. Entire ways of life are disappearing as communities are forced to adapt to new environments. Despite the challenges, many communities are finding ways to adapt to climate change while preserving their cultural heritage. This resilience is a testament to the strength of human culture in the face of adversity. In some regions, farmers are adopting new sustainable practices, such as agroforestry, to combat soil erosion and increase crop resilience. Cities around the world are also taking steps to adapt, creating more green spaces and developing flood-resistant infrastructure to mitigate the effects of climate change. Meanwhile, efforts are being made to document and preserve cultural practices that are at risk of being lost. From oral histories to digital archives, communities are finding ways to ensure that their cultural heritage endures. Climate change is not just an environmental crisis, it's a cultural one. As our world heats up and ecosystems shift, human cultures are being reshaped in profound ways. But with collective action and innovative solutions, we can find ways to preserve our cultural heritage while building a more sustainable future. We all have a role to play in combating climate change and preserving the richness of global cultures. The time to act is now.